Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus took Peter, John, and James and went up the mountain to pray. While he was praying, his face changed in appearance, and his clothing became dazzling white. And behold, two men were conversing with him, Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his exodus that he was going to accomplish in Jerusalem. Peter and his companions had been overcome by sleep, but becoming fully awake, they saw his glory and the two men standing with him. As they were about to part from him, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." But he did not know what he was saying. While he was still speaking, a cloud came and cast a shadow over them, and they became frightened when they entered the cloud. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my chosen son. Listen to him." After the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone. They fell silent and did not at that time tell anyone what they had seen. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Each year on this second Sunday of Lent, our first reading comes from the book of Genesis and speaks to us about Abram, whose name was later changed to Abraham. He was given a promise by God, and that promise was he would have many descendants. Yet the fact was, he and his wife were advanced in years, and they had no children. God was going to give them a son, even in their old age, Isaac. But the descendants that God spoke to Abram about was not only their own son, but the fact that he would be the father of many of the Jewish people who would come to follow him and go into the promised land. God made a covenant with Abram. God promised Abram that he would do what he had promised him he would do. And Abram was faithful to that promise. Also on this second Sunday of Lent, our gospel is always a story about the transfiguration of the Lord. 1 year from Matthew, 1 year from Mark, and this year from Luke. It's important to note, before the transfiguration took place, Jesus had spoke to his disciples the first of 3 times about the fact that he was going to have to suffer and die before he rose from the dead. And Jesus gave Peter, John, and James this image of him, an image in which his clothes were dazzling white, his face and appearance had changed, showing Jesus in all his glory. They were allowed to see, just for a little bit, what heaven was going to be like. They were given a promise by Jesus that even though Jesus was going to have to suffer and die, that was never going to be the end of the story. The end of the story was going to be his resurrection. And ultimately, the end of the story was going to be that we would all join Jesus in his resurrection when we are with him in heaven, in everlasting peace and happiness and joy. Jesus was conversing with Moses and Elijah, which gave the apostles the message that not only what Jesus was doing was his own doing, but also that he was connected to the Old Testament and to the prophets of the Old Testament, including Moses and Elijah. The disciples wanted to make 3 tents up on the mountain when they saw Jesus transfigured. One for Jesus, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. Interestingly enough, Jesus never responded to that request. He simply went down from the mountain with the disciples. He was saying to them, even though I have given you this glimpse of what the future will bring, we have to go down and continue to live the gospel. We have to continue to live what I have come to preach. And I have come to preach what God the Father is asking me to preach. So today, as we continue the season of Lent, we are reminded of Abraham's faith. His faith in a God who gave him descendants, even in his old age. And we are reminded that even though there is suffering and death in the world, that is never the end. It is never the end for us. We have reason to hope because of our belief that Jesus will allow us to experience the resurrection, to experience being with God in heaven forever.